That afternoon, the Chicago sky began to darken. A light drizzle fell, wetting the congested streets. At an intersection in the Lincoln Park area, horns blared in chorus while people hurried home from work and school. Amidst the crowd, a girl in a school uniform stood on the curb, slowly walking her moped. Her name was Sarah Peterson, a senior at a local high school. Her moped had just stalled after hitting a water-filled pothole. She pulled over with a panicked look, afraid of being late. Her mother was sick at home, and her father had died long ago in a work-related accident. Since then, Sarah had become a small pillar of support for the family, helping her mother sell homemade baked goods from their apartment. She tried to start the moped several times, but only a choked sputter came from the engine. "Oh God, please start," she muttered anxiously. Before she could compose herself, a police patrol car stopped nearby. Two officers got out. One, in a full uniform with sunglasses despite the overcast sky, had a name tag that read Officer Rick Sullivan. With an imposing stride and a loud voice, he approached. "Hey, you know this is a busy street? Don't block traffic." "Why is your moped parked right here?" he barked. Sarah instinctively looked down politely. "I'm sorry, officer. My moped stalled. I'm trying to move it to the sidewalk, but it's heavy." But her soft tone was met with harshness. "Just an excuse. Kids today are nothing but trouble. Let me see your registration and license." Sarah grew nervous. She had just turned 16 last month and had only applied for her license. The process wasn't finished. She pulled out the registration with a trembling hand. "Here, officer. But my license hasn't been issued yet. It's still processing at the DMV." Officer Sullivan scoffed. "Processing? That's what they all say. You think I'm easy to fool?" He glanced at Sarah's dusty moped. His eyes narrowed. "This moped isn't yours, is it?" "Probably stolen." Sarah was stunned. Her voice began to tremble. "No, officer. It was my late father's moped." But before she could explain further, Sullivan snatched the keys from her hand. "All right, you're coming with me to the station. We'll check it out there. We're seeing a lot of girls running stolen vehicles lately." A few drivers stopped at the red light turned to look. Sarah hung her head, ashamed and scared. She tried to speak softly to avoid public embarrassment. "Officer, please, not here. I haven't done anything wrong." But Officer Sullivan grabbed her arm harshly. "Don't resist. This is procedure. Let's go." Sarah's arm was wrenched, and her backpack fell to the street. Her textbooks and small wallet spilled out. Several students walking by watched, but no one dared to intervene. The other, younger officer, named Frank Diaz, looked hesitant. "Hey Rick, she really looks like a student. Maybe we should just ask her nicely." But Sullivan glared at his partner. "Shut up, Diaz. Don't be soft. You give these kids an inch, they walk all over you." Sarah began to hold back tears. She felt humiliated. But beneath her fear, a spark of courage ignited by the pain. She looked directly at Sullivan. "Officer, I'm just a student. I'm not a thief. If you want to check my record, fine, but don't pull me like this." Her tone was polite but firm. Officer Sullivan felt challenged. Annoyed, he pushed Sarah toward the patrol car. "Enough talking. You can explain everything at the station." The rain started coming down harder. Sarah's clothes were soaked, her hair sticking to her cheeks. People began to gather, some recording with their phones. But Sullivan didn't care. His ego and anger had overshadowed his conscience. On the way to the police substation under the overpass, Sarah was silent. She stared out the patrol car window, holding back tears. In her mind, she had only one thought: how was her mom doing at home? Arriving at the station, Sullivan immediately ordered Sarah to sit on a cold metal chair. "Now, tell the truth. Who owns that moped? If you lie, this will get a lot worse." Sarah tried to explain, showing the registration and her state ID. But Sullivan kept cutting her off. "IDs can be faked. You can get those made on any street corner." Sullivan then took Sarah's phone without permission. He scrolled through it and saw a photo of a man in uniform. "Who's this? Your boyfriend?" "A cop too, huh?" he asked mockingly. Sarah took a deep breath. "That's my father, officer." "He's deceased." Sullivan chuckled. "Deceased. A classic excuse. If you were really a cop's kid, you wouldn't be like this. Scruffy, old moped, no license." Sarah fell silent. Her tears finally fell. Not from fear, but from disappointment. Not just at Sullivan's treatment, but at the fact that the uniform her father once wore with pride was now the source of her humiliation. Outside the station, Diaz, who had followed them, looked uneasy. He looked inside while speaking to another officer at the desk. "Sullivan's going too far. That kid really doesn't seem like a criminal. Try running the plates on that moped." The desk officer typed the license plate number into the computer. The result appeared on the screen. Owner, deceased Officer Adam Peterson, CPD 18th District. The name made Diaz freeze. He stared at the screen, making sure he read it right. Officer Adam Peterson. Isn't that the officer who was killed in the line of duty 3 years ago during that drug bust? The desk officer nodded. "Yeah, that's him. A hero around here. Died saving a civilian from gunfire." Diaz's face tensed. He quickly entered the room where Sullivan was still interrogating Sarah. "Rick, stop. This is important." Sullivan, still glaring at Sarah, turned around, annoyed. "What is it now, Diaz?" The registration checked out. "The moped is registered to Officer Adam Peterson. This girl is his daughter." Sullivan was silent for a few seconds. "His daughter? Whose daughter?" "Officer Adam Peterson's. Our own hero, man." The room went quiet. Sarah looked down, wiping her tears, but said nothing. Officer Sullivan slowly lowered his voice, but his pride kept him from apologizing. "Well, I didn't know. But she's still in the wrong, riding without a license," he said quietly. Diaz stared at him sharply. "Man, don't try to justify this. You were incredibly harsh with her. If those videos people took get out, it'll be a disaster for our reputation." Sullivan immediately looked toward the window. Sure enough, a few people were still standing outside, some recording from a distance. He started to panic. "Quick, go tell them to delete those." But Sarah had already stood up, her eyes fixed on Sullivan. "You don't need to worry about those videos, officer. If you apologize sincerely, I won't pursue this. But if you don't, I'll let everyone know how you treat a hero's daughter." Her words were calm, but each one seemed to slap Sullivan's pride. For the first time, the arrogant officer was speechless. He could only stare at the young woman before him, wet, tired, but standing tall with a courage that shamed him. A few minutes later, the atmosphere in the station calmed. Sullivan sat silently, while Diaz gave Sarah a rain poncho and a bottle of water. "I'm really sorry, Sarah. I should have stopped this from the beginning." Sarah gave a small smile. "It's not your fault, Officer Diaz. Sometimes people forget that power isn't meant to be shown off, but to be protected." The words hit hard. Sullivan heard them clearly, and though he didn't reply, his face showed remorse. That night, Sarah was finally driven home by Diaz. Her apartment was in a modest building on a narrow street, its lights dim. The sound of a distant church bell rang out for the evening. Her mother, Rachel, greeted her with relief, though she looked pale. "Thank God, you're home, honey. I was so worried." Sarah hugged her mom. "Sorry, Mom. There was a little incident on the way." Rachel looked at her gently. "Even if people are cruel, don't you ever carry that hate. You just have to let it go." Sarah nodded slowly. She knew her mother was probably right. But in her heart, she felt something was about to happen. A karma that would soon arrive to balance the scales. The next day, a small story on social media began to blow up. A 2-minute video showed a police officer yelling at a high school student in the middle of the street, then grabbing her arm aggressively. The officer's face was clearly visible, as was the terrified expression of the girl he was berating. The caption was simple: "Daughter of a police hero treated like a criminal by one of her father's own." The video was uploaded by one of the drivers at the red light. Overnight, it had tens of thousands of views. Comments flooded in. Some were angry, some sad. Many harshly criticized the behavior of an officer meant to protect and serve. At the 18th District Station, the morning atmosphere was tense. All officers were gathered in the briefing room after the news reached the district commander, Captain Miller. "Sullivan, do you realize what you've done?" The captain's voice boomed. Officer Sullivan stood stiffly at the front, his face pale. I didn't know she was Officer Peterson's daughter, sir." Miller slammed his fist on the table. "That's exactly the problem. It shouldn't matter who she is. Your job isn't to trample on people's dignity." He paused, looking at all the silent officers. Adam Peterson was one of the most honest cops in this district. He died in the line of duty, leaving behind a wife and daughter that you just treated like garbage. "Aren't you ashamed?" Sullivan looked down. "It was a lapse in judgment, sir." "A lapse?" "If it wasn't for Diaz trying to de-escalate, that video would be even worse. You'd be suspended today." Diaz, sitting in the back, just sighed. He felt guilty too for not stopping Sullivan at the scene. But it was too late. The captain continued. "As of today, you are on desk duty, pending a full internal investigation. And I want you to go directly to the home of the late Officer Peterson and apologize. Understand?" Sullivan was stunned. "To his house, sir?" "Yes. Don't just act tough on the street. If you have any integrity left, you'll go and apologize." That afternoon, Sullivan went to Sarah's apartment. He wore civilian clothes and carried a small gift basket with fruit and groceries. But his steps were heavy. In front of the simple apartment building, he could hear the sound of kids playing, the smell of cooking from neighbors, and the distant city traffic. He knocked softly. Soon, Rachel appeared, wearing a worn-out housecoat but with a kind face. "Hello." "Hello." "Ma'am, is this Rachel Peterson, Sarah's mother?" "Yes." "I'm sorry, who are you?" Sullivan looked down politely. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Sullivan. I'm the one who had the misunderstanding with Sarah yesterday." Rachel's expression changed instantly, but she remained calm. "Oh. Yes. Please come in. It's all right. Sarah's in her room, just got back from her study group." Sullivan sat on the simple wooden chair in the living room. A photo of the late Officer Adam Peterson hung on the wall, in full uniform, smiling proudly. Below it was a small memorial candle and some dried flowers. Sullivan looked down, deeply ashamed. A moment later, Sarah came out. She was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt. When she saw Sullivan, she stopped. "Officer." Sullivan stood up. His voice was quiet but heavy. "Sarah, I came to apologize. I realize I was completely out of line. I'm embarrassed, especially after learning who your father was." Sarah looked at him for a long moment before answering. "I don't want you to be embarrassed because of my father, officer. I want you to be embarrassed because you realize what you did was wrong. Anyone treated like that would be hurt." Her words made Sullivan look down again. "I promise it won't happen again, Sarah. Sometimes I forget. I used to want to be a cop to help people. But somewhere along the way, I just got hard. My ego won." Rachel sat down beside them. "Everyone makes mistakes, officer. What matters is knowing how to fix them." Sullivan nodded slowly. He left the gift basket on the table. "This is just a small token of my apology. Please accept it." Sarah looked at him, then spoke gently. "I accept your apology, officer. But please don't let it stop at words. Be the kind of officer my father was, one that people respected for his kindness, not feared for his power." The words were like a gentle slap. Sullivan looked into Sarah's clear eyes, then stood and shook both their hands respectfully. "I'll remember that, Sarah. Thank you for reminding me." Several days passed. The video of the incident had gone viral, but after Sarah posted a statement on social media that the issue had been resolved privately, public attention slowly faded. However, quietly, the story made many in the department realize that power without empathy only brought shame. Meanwhile, Sarah refocused on school. Final exams were approaching, and she was determined to graduate with high honors so she could get into college. But something had changed in her. She was calmer, wiser, and more confident. One afternoon, while helping her mom package some baked goods, a patrol car stopped in front of her building. Sarah tensed, but this time it wasn't Sullivan. It was Officer Diaz. "Afternoon, Mrs. Peterson," he greeted warmly. "Oh, hello, Officer Diaz. Sarah's in the kitchen. I'll get her." Sarah came out smiling. "Officer Diaz. What's up? Don't tell me I'm getting another ticket," she joked. Diaz laughed. "No, nothing like that. I was just finishing my patrol and wanted to stop by with some news. Officer Sullivan was transferred to another district. They say he wants to start fresh." Sarah nodded. "I hope he really changes." "Yeah. Oh, and one more thing." Diaz pulled a small envelope from his bag. "This is a formal commendation from the superintendent for Officer Peterson's family. It's been held up in administration for a long time, but it finally came through." Sarah was stunned. "A commendation?" "Yes. When your father was killed, he was posthumously awarded the department's Medal of Valor. This is the official presentation to his family." Rachel looked at the envelope, her eyes welling up. "Oh, thank God. Your father's sacrifice. Finally recognized, honey." Sarah accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a certificate signed by the superintendent with the words, "For extraordinary bravery and sacrifice in the protection of the community, Officer Adam Peterson is awarded the Departmental Medal of Honor." Tears of joy streamed down their faces. Not tears of sadness, but of relief after years of living in the shadow of their loss. Diaz bowed his head respectfully. "I'm just delivering the message, ma'am. I hope this helps heal some old wounds." Sarah looked at Diaz and smiled. "Thank you, officer. Sometimes life has its own way of showing that the truth always wins." Several months passed. Sarah finally graduated as valedictorian of her high school. At the graduation ceremony, the principal called her name in front of hundreds of students. "This year's highest academic achievement goes to Sarah Peterson, a student known for her courage, honesty, and devotion to her family." Thunderous applause erupted. Among the guests, Diaz attended quietly, standing at the back of the auditorium. He watched Sarah walk onto the stage in a simple white graduation dress, accepting her diploma with a sincere smile. On her face was an extraordinary calm. Not because of the title, but because of the difficult journey she had overcome. Meanwhile, far outside the city, Sullivan was on duty at a small substation in a coastal town. There was no traffic, no citizens to yell at, only fishermen and the salty air. But it was there he found the peace he had lost. He often helped locals fix their boats, helped kids cross the street, and even volunteered at the local youth center. One night, staring at the ocean, he remembered Sarah's face, the girl he had humiliated, but who had, in turn, made him realize who he really was. He smiled to himself and whispered, "Thank you, kid. You taught me how to be human again." Several years later, at a graduation ceremony at the Chicago Police Academy, a young woman stepped up to the podium. She wore the crisp blue uniform, complete with insignia on her shoulders. Her name tag read, Sarah Peterson. Yes, Sarah had ultimately joined the police academy. Her dream of protecting the community, like her father, had come true. In her speech before high-ranking officials and senior officers, her voice was firm yet gentle. "My father taught me that a police officer's honor isn't measured by rank or power, but by how they treat other human beings. I learned that from him, and from a bitter experience that almost made me lose faith." The room was silent. Many were moved by her words. In the back row, Diaz smiled proudly. And at the edge of the room, a tan, weathered man in a senior officer's uniform stood at attention, his head bowed. Officer Rick Sullivan. Their eyes met for a moment. Sullivan looked at Sarah with sincere respect, and Sarah returned it with a small, knowing smile. There was no revenge, only the understanding that people can change. Karma had run its course, not to punish, but to awaken. 3 years had passed since that graduation. Now, Officer Sarah Peterson was officially assigned to the 1st District, Central, in Chicago. She had become one of the young female officers known for her discipline and integrity. In her daily work, Sarah was often on the street, not just behind a desk. That morning, the Chicago sky was clear. The air wasn't too hot yet. Sarah wore her full uniform, her hair in a neat bun. Her face was calm as usual. She was preparing for a joint traffic operation. Her partner, Officer Lisa Chin, approached, sipping coffee from a styrofoam cup. "Seriously, Peterson? You're really going out on this operation today? I heard all the brass is out there." Sarah smiled slightly. "That's the point. If the people on the ground don't show up, how will they know the real situation?" Chin shook her head, chuckling. "You're different. Most women, once they make rank, want a desk, not the street. If my father were alive, he'd say, 'Don't just wear the uniform, understand what it means,'" Sarah replied, closing a report folder. The two of them headed to the operation location near the Maxwell Street Market area. The streets were getting busy. Vendors, city buses, and mopeds passed by. But amidst the crowd, Sarah saw something that caught her attention. An elderly man was being yelled at by 2 traffic cops. His moped was detained on the side of the road, and the man looked agitated. Sarah approached. "Good morning. Is there a problem, officers?" she asked calmly. One of the cops, a large man with a thick mustache, turned. "Oh no, Officer Peterson. This gentleman just claims he forgot his registration, so we're impounding his moped." The old man looked down. "I was just taking my grandson to school, officer. The registration is at home. My house is right near here." Sarah studied the man. His clothes were worn, his hands trembled, and in the moped's basket was a small elementary school backpack. "Where's your grandson?" "He already walked to school, ma'am. He was afraid of being late." Sarah sighed. "Sir, where do you live?" "In an apartment just behind the market, ma'am." "I can get the registration right now if these officers would just wait a minute." Sarah turned to the 2 officers. "If he lives close by and is willing to get the registration, why not give him time?" One of them, named Officer Evans, answered somewhat curtly. "Rules are rules, Peterson. If we let everyone who forgot go, it'd be chaos." Sarah looked at him with a sharp, controlled gaze. "Rules are made to uphold justice, not to inconvenience honest people, Officer Evans." The atmosphere immediately became tense. Several onlookers whispered. Evans looked down. "Sorry, ma'am." Sarah turned back to the old man. "Sir, go get your registration now. We'll wait here. Once you show it, you're free to go." The man smiled in relief. "Thank you, officer. God bless you." After the man left, Chin approached and whispered, "You realize what just happened, right? You sounded exactly like that cop who yelled at you back in the day." Sarah turned, a faint smile on her lips. "Maybe. Because I don't want anyone else to ever feel that way." Chin went quiet, then patted her shoulder. "Yeah, you really are different." A few days later, Sarah received a sudden summons from the 1st District Commander, Commander Hayes. She was asked to come to his office that afternoon. "Have a seat, Peterson," Hayes said as she entered. "I've been hearing your name on the street." Sarah was surprised. "A problem, sir?" "Not a bad one. A lot of residents say you're fair and don't play rough. But others, some officers, feel you're too soft. That you're making their job harder." The implication was clear. Sarah looked at him straight on, without fear. "If making their job harder means I'm stopping them from shaking people down for extra cash, then I accept that, sir." Hayes sighed. "I know you're idealistic, Peterson. But this world isn't always black and white." "That's true, sir. But our job isn't to bend with the world. It's to try and straighten it out." The words made Hayes pause. Finally, he smiled slightly. "You're just like your father. He and I used to argue about things like this all the time." Sarah was shocked. "You knew my father?" Hayes nodded. "We were in the academy together. He was a good man." Honest, but stubborn as hell. I still remember when he was hit during that drug bust. He protected the civilian first, before himself. If you've got that in you, then his blood truly runs deep. Sarah looked down, moved. Thank you, sir. One more thing, Hayes continued. Next week, you're assigned to an internal affairs operation in the Englewood district. We have indications of corruption by some of our own. I want you on the ground, reporting directly to me. Sarah looked at him, resolute. Yes, sir. The day of the operation arrived. The target was an old warehouse in Englewood, suspected of being a hub for an extortion racket involving uniformed officers. A joint team was assembled that night. Sarah was with several senior officers. But when the van stopped near the location, Sarah felt something strange. Among the team members, she recognized a familiar face, Officer Rick Sullivan. Yes, the man who had once dragged her on the street was now standing in the same briefing circle. His uniform looked worn, his face older, but his eyes were much softer than before. Sullivan looked just as surprised to see Sarah. Officer Peterson. You? I mean, you're on this detail. Sarah smiled faintly. Yes, Officer Sullivan. Small world. He nodded respectfully. I've heard a lot about you. It's impressive. I'm proud of how far you've come. Sarah just replied with a nod. In her eyes, there was no